Metaphor ReFantazio was a game that kind of snuck up on me. I heard a little bit about it on Twitter, and when the demo dropped, everybody was going crazy for it. So I figured, what the heck? I applied for a review code, which, by the way, thank you Sega for kind of sponsoring this video here today, and I dropped myself into what would later become a 60+ hour adventure, a race to crown a new king. But after playing this game in its entirety, can I confidently say it's JRPG of the year, or is it just a 60+ hour disappointment? Let's find out. As always, before we get to that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on this game. I've read a lot of hype for this game. I haven't really looked at reviews or anything as such just yet because I wanted to go 100% spoiler free during my playthrough. So this is my first time actually doing anything Metaphor related. And yeah, let's get going to the video. I'm going to break this down into a few different categories. Not necessarily a review of sorts, just more of my overall thoughts on the game. Let's go. So I've never played an Atlus JRPG before, believe it or not. No Persona games or no Shin Megami Tensei. This is all very new to me. So I'm sure there are some similarities here that you all know that I won't, so I'm sorry if I don't mention those. But regardless, this video assumes that you've played the game long enough to understand what's happening. There's going to be some spoilers here, so I'll do my best to avoid those, but it just simply can't be helped when trying to talk about this game in full. So let's briefly summarize the story here, and then I'll follow on with my thoughts. So Metaphor ReFantazio begins with the recent assassination of the king, and that has thrown the entire kingdom into chaos. In a world bound by unique royal magic, the sudden vacancy on the throne sparks a high-stakes tournament to determine the next ruler. Amid this upheaval, the protagonist, who in my case I named Will because that's his canon name, alongside his fairy companion Gallica, embark on a journey to save a cursed prince whom the kingdom believes to be lost. The story had a lot of ups and downs for me, but overall I think I had a hard time attaching myself to it. It took about 20 hours to mostly hook me in, whereas if you've played this game, you might have been in from the moment the game starts. What really kept me going in terms of story was an overall interest in seeing what was next, rather than it consuming my thoughts, desperately seeking answers in the story as some games do for me, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I couldn't wait to see what was happening with every twist and turn there, but this, it was just, yeah, a more of a general interest in, yeah, I wonder what'll happen next. That being said, there's a lot that happens within the world, and the story is paced out in kind of an okay-ish way, considering how long the game is in real time and in-game time, taking place over a period of several months. The main themes of the story here are trying to overcome racism and discrimination, which is quite clearly present as some tribes are more liked in society than others. For example, the main character here is from an Elda tribe and is seen as the lowest of the low and is met with some quite harsh critique by some of the people in the kingdom. Obviously, the story is about, overcoming all that and joining up with one person from each tribe in your party to form a super team to eventually save the world. It's all cool, but it felt quite cliche and almost shallow in some ways. Then later in the game, we also shift from discrimination as a main point for the people's troubles to the anxiety that lives within everyone. This ended up being kind of like maybe a forced late game issue, as the main villain of the game, Luis, takes advantage of this and clouds everyone's judgment with it. It kind of felt a little bit forced in a way. And speaking of Luis, he seemed like a decent villain, I guess, but I never really completely got him. I actually felt more of a compelling case for bad guy of the game from Sanctifex Forden, but he was killed mid-game and Luis took over that big bad role, so that was really it. Luis had some good points, I suppose some compelling points about wanting to save the world, but in typical JRPG fashion, he's got them for the wrong reasons and wants to implement them in the wrong ways. I think overall the story was the weakest point of Metaphor for me, and that's not to say that the story was bad, but a lot of it just felt cliche, and I never really felt blown away by it in a way that I wanted to. I'm sure a lot of you who have played the game will disagree, and yeah, that's totally fine. It's a game with an overarching theme of social justice, and it just never stuck with me. I feel it's a game that could maybe have been condensed in a way to make some of the more story beats more impactful. Now, as far as the characters in the world, with the main party, I found most of them pretty likable. There wasn't one person that I didn't care for or find annoying, which is quite rare, to be honest with you. I did take quite a liking to Hulkenberg and Heisme, two really great characters in the game, and you do have the option to flesh out their stories a bit more with bond links, something we'll talk about here soon, but it just gives you more of a reason to invest your time in these people in a way that you can't just do in other games. So while I did have my favorites, really enjoyed the party that we were given, and I feel they fit really well into the story that was presented, even if some characters entered your party very, very late in the game. Now, with the story and some of my thoughts on that out of the way, let's get over to the gameplay. Of course, it's a JRPG, so we can expect turn-based battles, which was really great. I really liked that. The gameplay of the game was a main high point for me, and that's the thing that kept me coming back, even when the story couldn't. So while you're on your quest to find a new king for the kingdom, you'll find yourself walking around towns, chatting with townsfolk to initiate quests, or find hints about what to do or where to go next. Initially, I found it kind of a little bit overwhelming, but after sticking with it, I found it, much easier to figure out where stuff was, especially thanks to the map, and fast travel. Crazy, right? Who would have thought that would help? In the end, it was fun wandering towns initially, but I just quickly found where the weapons store was as soon as I could for gear and upgrades, and I didn't do much exploring beyond that other than going to places where I needed to go or talking to people I needed to talk to purely for moving the story along. Now, yes, I did mention turn-based gameplay, and this is super fun here. As with most turn-based games, you'll take turns, select actions, and some enemies have elemental weaknesses, which you'll have to figure out. It's all pretty standard stuff, but I am a sucker for turn-based action, so I really loved it. Now, one of the main features of the battles here are archetypes, the jobs of the game. So let's quickly sidestep from the battle system here and discuss archetypes. Now, the archetype system was a standout feature for me. As someone who enjoys the job systems of older Final Fantasy games, the archetype system really came as a pleasant surprise. And especially not knowing anything about this game prior to playing it, I didn't play the demo, I just totally went in cold here. I was quite happy to find that over time, you can find up to 46 different archetypes. Now, while these are more or less linked to the story, being powers of old, most archetypes are learned from other characters as you progress. As you get to know some of your followers, as they're called, or friends, your bond links, as I mentioned before, you can level that up and learn more archetypes from your peers. So if you want to find everything, it's best to take the time and chat to each of your peers because you never know what you can learn. It was really fun experimenting with different types of archetypes in battle. You do benefit from learning as much as you can from different types of archetypes because you'll have the option to inherit skills from other classes you've learned and essentially create a super character. Perhaps you spend time learning all the healing stuff and then you can maximize your time with an offensive job. Best of both worlds there. There's a lot to experiment with, so we're a bit spoiled for choice, but the thing is, with each party member being able to use all the same archetypes and weapons makes everybody feel the same and interchangeable. So there's almost no need to think about party composition. So it's almost like Final Fantasy VI in a way when you have everybody learn all the different magics. Essentially all your party becomes the same. So it's just a matter of picking out who's your favorite and just rolling with that. But in a nutshell, that's the archetype system.
Now hang on, before we get back to the battle system of Metaphor, I want to let you guys know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular are not subscribed. So if you enjoy deep dives into JRPGs and overall weekly JRPG content, I would love to have you here week in and week out. So don't forget to like and subscribe. So anyway, now that we've talked about archetypes, let's head back to the battle system overall.
So now that we're back to battles here and we've covered archetypes, you can select from either your standalone archetype skills in your turn-based battles or doing team-up attacks essentially with your archetype and borrow powers from some of your party members for some linked attacks. You have to be very strategic here because it doesn't just take up one turn for those actions. Sometimes it can take up 2 or 3 or 4 turns, so you have to plan accordingly as to not blow your turn order on something that maybe isn't quite worthwhile. Battles overall were really fun and not super challenging. However, the bosses did provide some challenge, so yeah, best to work out strategies as you find yourself in front of some harder enemies. Now, when you're not in battle or exploring towns, you're dungeon crawling, and this was super straightforward. And even better yet, as you level up, you'll be able to cut down weaker enemies and just skip battles while collecting experience points. This is something I wish turn-based games did more often. Don't make me waste 1 to 2 minutes on a pointless battle that I'm just going to win anyway. Let me collect the experience points and go. This is something that made dungeon crawling, which can be a little bit more monotonous, a lot more fun and approachable. Now, before I get to the main question of the video, is this JRPG of the year or is this a disappointing game? Let's talk about the calendar. The last time I played a game with an in-game calendar was Shenmue, believe it or not.
I see.
So this was really interesting to me. This game takes place on a day-to-day time frame, with some events taking place a week or up to a month in advance, and how you use your time is up to you, but it's best to maximize your time with boosting the bonds with your followers and friends, taking on bounties at the recruitment center, and improving your stats along the way. All these activities take different amounts of time, so obviously make sure to keep on top of that, but I felt that the game gave me enough time to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. However, at the very end of the game, I felt I couldn't finish it soon enough. I wish there would have been a way to speed up the in-game clock or just say, yes, I'd like to skip to the end of the month to do, these certain actions. I don't know. I just felt it was a bit of a slog at times, and this was because of the calendar. I think it's a cool idea and concept, and if you're really into these kind of games, You can manage your time and plan out activities, but I just kind of went for the quickest way to level up some, attributes to my characters or find something to do quickly just to pass the day because I wanted to see the next story beat. More on that soon. Now for the question, is it JRPG of the year? Is it a disappointing game? I don't think it's JRPG of the year. I personally found that it didn't live up to the hype that I was seeing online. It is a good game, however, in its own right, but with the story falling quite flat for me in some areas and never really wowing me, this was a major letdown that kept me from truly loving the game, which is crazy considering I spent 60 hours with it to complete it. It's unfair of me to say that I didn't like it, but it just felt shallow in some parts. And again, I can't compare to Persona or Shin Megami Tensei because I purely haven't played any of those yet. In fact, I was actually going to play Persona 5 Royal, but ended up getting a review code for this, so I just went with this. So I'd be interested to not necessarily compare them, but just see what the differences are between these style of games. I don't know if it's like a similar thing. But with that being said, I'm almost hesitant to play another 60-hour game that might be similar to this because I don't think I can take it on if I'm just going to be mildly interested in it just to see it through the credits. And yeah, sure, I know, that's on me for forcing myself to play it at times, but if it weren't for the gameplay keeping me on, the almost generic anime-esque story would have lost me 20 hours in. The story and the themes seemed like they would have been very dark and provocative, but it all ended up being very superficial and dull. At times, the game felt for me that it overstayed its welcome. I was wanting it to end sooner, but because of the calendar, I was just doing an endless loop of short activities or quick bounty hunts to pass the time, so I could then go on and save the world. It just didn't do it for me. The game does have a decent story and interesting gameplay, but honestly, the length of the game strings the plot out to feel very thin. If the game was condensed to maybe 20 or 30, maybe 40 max hours and had no in-game calendar, I'd honestly have no complaints. It wouldn't feel rushed, but it would just feel a lot more tidy for me. In the end, I'd say I liked this game, though it's probably not the game for me, and I'm probably not the target player for the game. There's a lot to enjoy here if you like job systems, dungeon crawling, turn-based gameplay, especially excellent voice acting and great music as well that really suits the game, and a decent story with political intrigue. I'd just say if they ended up doing a second one, I'd be interested to see if they maybe improved on this formula, but seeing people call this peak JRPG just doesn't make sense to me, and unfortunately that's purely on the story. It's a good game, it's just not earth-shattering top 5 JRPG of all time like I've seen some people say. So I would happily recommend this to you if you've watched this far and you haven't played the game yet, or if you're wondering whether or not to continue. I would just say if you're not hooked on this game within the first 10 or even more generously 20 hours, it's probably not going to get any better for you. I was just so far into the game that I kind of wanted to know what happened. I played that just to see the end result of the story. I didn't play it because I was truly emotionally invested in the game. There are some really great emotional moments throughout the story, don't get me wrong. I was attached to a handful of characters. This might be a game that I probably think about from time to time and think, yeah, it was okay, nothing more. The End Metaphor, I think, is a good game. Maybe not necessarily a great, amazing game like a lot of other people are saying, but this is a game that I think mileage will vary depending on who you are as a JRPG fan. Ultimately, just never clicked with me. I enjoyed my time with it, but definitely not my game of the year. So as always, let me know down below in the comments your thoughts. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again on the next video. Thanks for watching.